Her Excellency, Miss Henrietta Elizabeth Thompson, affectionately known as Liz, is a Barbadian lawyer, politician, senator, and author. She is also the former ambassador to the UN for Barbados and has made significant contributions to sustainable energy policies. As a politician whose career began in 1994 until 2008, she has held several portfolios and esteemed positions during her tenure. In 2010, she joined the UN as an Assistant Secretary General until 2013. After her aforementioned tenure, she would go on to hold two other prestigious positions whilst at the UN. We can continue to laud this woman of excellence. Without further ado, it's our pleasure to welcome to Good Morning SKN and Caribbean Connections, Her Excellency, Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson. Good morning, Ambassador, and welcome.
Thank you so very much. Good morning to you and Happy New Year.
Same to you as well. I forgot we were in that stage. Funny that we're in January.
Although the year is going so quickly already.
No, it is. It sure is. So, Ambassador, you were born in the United Kingdom. What is your connection to the island of Barbados?
Well, my parents were part, and I have to tell you, I've done many media interviews over the years. You're the only person who's ever asked me that, so thank you for that question. Yeah. My parents were actually part of the Windrush generation. Okay. So they went to the United Kingdom in the 1950s when so many Black Caribbean nationals were migrating there because there was a horrible, a very severe labor shortage. And as you know, many of these persons, many of these many of the people who migrated, many of the Caribbean migrants became significant players in the London transport system, the healthcare system, etc. My godmother, one of my godmothers, eventually became the first Black woman to become an inspector on the London buses and the London bus service. My dad was one of the first Black men, he and a Jamaican, to become signalman in the railway service. And that was an extremely prestigious job in those days because the trains were operated manually. It wasn't all automated like now. So they were really responsible for the safe running and the transport of all of the people on the trains. And they had to moderate the signals to make sure that trains could change lanes and move in and out of stations safely without collision. And they encountered great prejudice. My parents were fortunate enough. They worked hard, 2 jobs each, and bought property in London in the 1950s. So that is really my connection. There was a very bad winter. I think it was either 1961 or 62, perhaps 63, somewhere in that region. And Dad decided he had had enough of the cold in London and he wanted to come back to Barbados. And so he left and opened the second laundry and dry cleaning service in Barbados, which is still open today and run by my sister. So that's a very long answer to your question, but I'm so excited that you asked it because, like I said, nobody has ever asked me that before.
Oh, happy.
All right, so Ambassador, you said something that resonated with me in your answer to Cortense's question just now, which was about prejudice that those folks experienced. And in listening to your speech at the Prime Minister's Gala, a small island, sustainable island state, when you were speaking to inclusivity, when you implored the Prime Minister to be inclusive, I want to ask you now, as a woman, as a Barbadian woman, as a Black woman, as a woman who just expressed a lot of facts about the Windrush generation and your godmother becoming the inspector. When you look at your role as a leader and as a woman, do you think that you are uniquely positioned, which I think you are, to not only look at the past and see what we needed to do, how far we've come, but where we need to go in the future as we talk about inclusivity?
I think that's such an interesting perspective that you're raising. I don't know if I'm uniquely placed. I think my generation is, because we came from the period of colonialism. We lived through colonialism. We were part of the generation that saw independence very early in our lives. And certainly in relation to Barbados, we are now moving to republic status. So really the question is, how does this generation prepare a Caribbean that allows the next generation, the succeeding generation, to achieve their full potential and to be recognized as valued world citizens? And I think that that is important for policymakers. What kind of Caribbean are we shaping and framing? What kind of future do we envisage for our people? So that is an important component of it. But I think the second really very important aspect of this matter of inclusion is the whole issue of socioeconomic inclusion in societies where people are under so much economic pressure, where people feel that there's an us and them, that they are not, the state, the country does not invest in them by allowing them to achieve their full potential, by ensuring that they have a stake in the country's wealth. How do we change that to ensure that all people, irrespective of their social address, irrespective of whether they are brilliant or physically or mentally challenged, irrespective of their gender, that they can live full lives of dignity with all of the benefits that citizenship has to offer, and that they're truly included and they can invest in the society. And I don't mean economically invest, even though that is important. I mean fully invest themselves in the well-being of a society, because they truly believe that that society is equally invested in them.
Well said. We are going to stick on the gala. Well, you came for the gala. How did you enjoy St. Kitts? And how excited were...
Go on, sorry. No, tell me.
You came for the gala. How did you enjoy the Federation? I would have hoped you would have went over to Nevis. And how did you enjoy the gala?
The gala was the bomb.
I like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a wonderful time.
I'm glad you did.
The Prime Minister was so gracious, and his team, and the St. Kitts Labour Party and the organizers. I think that is how every country should start their new year, quite frankly, because not just was it a good time where everybody was able to attend, well, as many as the can hold, but certainly it allowed you to celebrate your country in a wonderful way. Insofar as somebody is asked to deliver a feature address, it allows you to attend to what Stalin calls duty in his song Wait, Dorothy, Wait, duty before pleasure, and focus your mind on, what is ahead, what can you do. And their theme was new beginnings, which really is very relevant for a new government, the beginning of a year, a political party that has to craft a new vision in a very, very difficult period of history. So I had a wonderful time. I asked them if they couldn't find a reason to get me back the following weekend, and they did, because the one of the feature address speaker for the Business and Professional Women's International meeting, which was the following weekend, canceled, and I got asked to fill the slot. So it was a great gig.
Nice.
I know we didn't plan to discuss this, but since you brought it up, Ambassador, what did you talk with those women about?
Essentially, my speech was crafted around the fact that despite the Women's Action Platform and agenda, which is called the Beijing Platform of Action, designed many years ago, and despite what we think is all of the legislation and what we think are all of the mechanisms intended to move women to equal social and economic status, that the barriers, the research done by the World Economic Forum is demonstrating that it would take 145 years now since COVID. Before COVID, it was maybe about 110, 115, to bridge the social economic disparities between men and women. In fact, in the Caribbean, women work for between 60 to 80 cents on a man's dollar. The majority of the unemployed are female. The majority of the poor are female. The majority of poor households are female-led, despite the fact that there are so many female graduates from the University of the West Indies. Male graduates tend to get employed before they do, irrespective of how well qualified the women are. So we think that we have done great in the Caribbean on this issue of gender equity. But when you take the data and you break it down, you see that we have not done as well. So I was looking at the whole concept of the utilization of resources. There is no enterprise in the world where you would underutilize 50% of your resources and call it a success. So I was looking at that whole issue and talking about some of the measures that could or should be taken to try to improve the issue of gender equity, and for us to have a discussion across the region really about what gender equity means, and to deal with this perception that women have become so highly successful that we don't have any issues in the Caribbean. And I didn't even just now in my remarks start to get into the matter of domestic and gender-based violence. So it was, I think, an important framing speech in the gender space, and something on which we need more discussion.
Ambassador Thompson, my question to you now is, given your responsibility, the areas of your responsibility, particularly as it concerns climate change, how have you seen small island developing states, particularly those in the Caribbean, being affected by climate change, and what is the nature of your work to ensure that we could be resilient to it?
Well, we see Caribbean states being significantly affected by climate change, whether it has to do with the influx of sargassum seaweed, whether it has to do with the increasing intensity of extreme weather events and freak weather events. Only at Christmas we had storms. I think it was in St. Vincent. We had the ash fall, even though that isn't directly weather. We've had bad storms, Maria, Dorian, and you could go on. We see our changing coastlines, intense heat and drought affecting water resources, and so on. So I think that this is really an issue that is going to be now generational, that it is something that we are going to have to be formulating policy for, building resilience, addressing issues of adaptation and mitigation. In relation to my own work, it involves working at the level of policy implementation in Barbados, supporting policy formulation. It involves international engagement, so that I would have attended the Conference of the Parties for the United Nations Framework Convention conference on climate change last November in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. In fact, I was asked by the Alliance of Small Island States, which is the umbrella body under which the Caribbean tends to negotiate. At that meeting, I was asked to be the pen holder, or the person responsible for drafting our perspective, the Caribbean perspective, into the final outcome document of the meeting, so that you asked about building resilience. So building resilience has to do with the policy formulation, with the advocacy and engagement at the national and international level, with public awareness, with ensuring that the Caribbean perspective is at the table, is shared, included and factored in to any international outcomes or regional outcomes, and that we understand that climate change is with us to stay, and therefore our policy planning and our programmatic implementation has to address the climate change, the wide ambit of climate change issues.
Mm-hmm. Is that, Ambassador, is that the reason why you were one of the two persons who played an integral part in coordinating the Rio Plus 20 conference?
No.
Okay.
Actually, okay, so at the time, I had been a government minister, and we had just lost government, the ONR administration in Barbados. I had lost my seat when we lost government in 2008.
Okay.
I actually applied and interviewed for a UN position at a very senior level to be executive director of the executive secretary, the post is officially called, of the UNFCCC, of the climate change process.
Okay.
I didn't get the job. Several people applied, and there was a short list of 3, and I was on it. But I'm told that I came second. I didn't get, because at that stage it's highly political. And I didn't have the full support of the government at the time, because of course the government in office was not my government.
Yes.
And I didn't get the job. And that is not to say that the person who got it was not deserving, not at all. She was excellent. But I'm making this point for a reason. I am told that I interviewed so exceptionally that even though I did not get that job, I was in my house one day, maybe 6 months later, the phone rang, and a senior person was on the phone who said to me, "We remember the interview that you did. A post of Assistant Secretary General is coming up, which is the 4th highest rank in the United Nations for this Rio Plus 20 conference on sustainable development, which is supposed to define how we do things going forward. Is this something in which you would be interested?" And I said, "Oh, yes, thank you for considering me. I'm deeply grateful that I was able to make a very positive impression on you. Yes, I would indeed be interested. Thank you so much for calling." And I put the phone down and went,
"Congratulations."
And I'm telling you all this because I want young people to understand, and women and professional people, that sometimes when you fail, it isn't the fact that you have failed. It is that you have done your best so that you position yourself for the future. So out of that failing interview, or out of the fact that I didn't get that job, came this job offer. And they were looking at the time for somebody who had been a government minister. I had 2 master's degrees, including one in energy. And I was grateful that of all of the people to whom the UN had access, that they tapped to me.
Nice, and congratulations on your achievement.
Yeah. So out of that came the sustainable development goals and all those kinds of issues that we are dealing with today. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're grateful that someone of your caliber representing the Caribbean has been able to contribute in that way, Ambassador. I do want to note very quickly that you were awarded the UN Champion of Earth in 2008. First person from the English-speaking Caribbean to be so recognized. Can you tell us about that? And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. This is an annual award that the UN gives. I imagine they screen thousands of people, and then they give it to people whom they think their policies, in the case of ministers, or their efforts have contributed in some way to helping to address issues relating to climate change and sustainable development. And in my case, I got mine for my work in sustainable development and climate change. having been a minister of government and also worked in consultancy in these fields. So basically, it was a recognition of the work that I had done leading Barbados's environmental and sustainable development policy and programs and initiatives. And, you know, we had developed, for instance, the first, I'm sorry, I'm pulling one of these blanks. I think I had too little sleep last night.
Oh, hope you get more today.
I hope so, but it may not happen. We had developed sustainable energy policy, but Barbados actually developed the first green economy policy in our hemisphere. And that I had led that amongst numerous other things. And so the award was a recognition of my work. And I'm proud to say that since then, Prime Minister Motley received the same award last year for her work and her advocacy on climate change. And I think we're the only Caribbean country, one of few Caribbean countries to be recognized with this particular award and the only one to receive two.